Hey y'all, how's it going? So this is, per popular request, kind of voice training part one. Not gonna go like hugely in depth on anything, but give like a long introduction to kind of a lot of different things. Is kind of the move for today. Um, Obviously, being on hormones and estrogen, being on testosterone does lower your voice. Being on estrogen doesn't raise your voice, which is, the sad fact of where we're at. And so when I'm not voice training, or when I'm not up here in this register, I am down here in this register all the time. And that's kind of where I used to hang out all the time. Classically trained bass two, all that good stuff. And so I definitely did a lot of like singing down here. It doesn't sound as natural as it used to, because I am spending so much of my time up and like in a significantly higher register now. And my voice just isn't quite used to hanging out here anymore. And so that's just kind of where we're at. But one sec, let me hop back up here. And so um, there's like different ways to go about that, different ways to do things, but I'm kind of gonna like separate this into like three main points. Is the main idea. And they are like pitch, resonance, and then inflection as the third point. And they all are like varying levels of importance. Pitch is medium, and like inflection is medium, but like resonance is like vitally important. Don't know why my flag is freaking out in the background, but we're good. Um, cool. And so we'll just start. Let's just hop right in. And so pitch, there's actually quite a bit of overlap between male and female voices. And on average, male voices obviously are a little lower, but female voices average at about an A3, which is here I have my trusty sound generator on my phone, um, which I will play that. So A3. Na, which is not actually that high. Part of like building pitch is to build like up to that. Personally, I shoot for a B3, as kind of my go-to baseline quote unquote, as my like fundamental pitch to kind of shoot for in my average, because that gives me like a little bit of wiggle room, and then like knowing that I'm gonna like start higher, and then like I almost always go down and lower as the sentences go on, and so that's kind of where like my nah, it's like where I want my voice to settle. um but like I want you to remember as you're kind of working on this that this is an average. um and so like many women's voices are higher, but also many women's voices are lower. And you should always like take that into account of like there's a lot of like I think it's like Cher, um has like a very low voice, but no one's going to question the fact that she's female. And so it's a lot of like different reasons. But basically, if you're just starting out, you want to like pick some exercises and start getting your voice used to being up in that register or used to being down, and like practicing. And so it's like some like simple warm ups like ah 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 ah. You just want to like start building in that kind of comfort. So like going up and down, like kind of those five steps, um, or like humming and doing lots of slides, like working on like keeping that connection, working on making sure your voice is connecting from low to high and high to low. All these things are really important, and just like getting used to how it feels to like have your voice at different pitches. And so you can practice at like mm, mm, ooh, ooh, ooh. And so that helps you start differentiating between like where like you would find like upper pitches and where you find lower pitches and getting used to kind of bouncing between those and controlling your voice. And so that's like a really good start getting like those warm-ups and those exercises, and just like it doesn't have to be anything hard. Like if you put your tongue behind your back to your teeth, and making kind of ng sound, and kind of slide around. That's a really good exercise for like practicing building pitch. But also then that gets into our next point, which is resonance, which is probably the most important part about feminizing vocal training, which is that women often speak very forward in their mask, quote unquote. Lots of other channels will go into like the actual like resonance spaces, R1, R2, R3. For me personally, if I'm thinking about R1 or R2 or R3, I am gone. Like I need my brain to be focused on other things and make speaking automatic. And so basically I think about it as like the resonance in your nose, or I think about it as like resonance kind of in your two front teeth. So that vowel, that ng, if you put your finger on your nose, you can feel your nose buzzing. Versus lower resonance or low voice resonance is often done in your chest or down here. And you can kind of feel that if you put your hand on your chest and go who, those are the same pitches. And that's putting the resonance here. And that's putting the resonance in my chest. And so you can feel it vibrating. And the goal of getting resonance is getting all your resonance kind of forward in your mask. And then you can lower the pitch a little bit. And then people will still hear your voice as female because you've taken out a lot of these lower resonance, lower chest resonances out of your voice. And so like ways to work on that is that ng, and feeling it, or like or e, then getting like these very bright nasally sounds. And then like once you get this like super hyper bright nasally sound, then you can back it off a little bit. Practice like trading back and forth between like bright resonance and low resonance. Oh, sorry. I'm like mostly set up and high, so it's hard to go back. But like you want to practice on being able to start like bright and then like work on trading it back to like lower resonance, and then like bringing it back forward into brighter resonance. And practice switching back and forth so you can feel what that's like. And then eventually you're going to be very comfortable keeping it up here. And then it doesn't really matter where your pitch ends up at. Because like that's what people will hear is these upper overtones, and like the resonance there is like the big player in like voice feminization. And so like playing with passing back and forth the resonances, and also like working on getting it that super high up, like all the way up here, and then like bringing it back down a little bit at a time to like a more normal register. Because a lot of women's voices hang out in like the low end of their register. And so you don't want to be like artificially at the top of your register, because that gives you nowhere to go and it starts sounding like very Minnie Mousy. And that's something we want to avoid. We want to be like day to day. We want it to feel natural. We want it to be just nice and easy. Okay. And then the third thing, is like our inflection. And I try not to think too much about this. But like one of the differences between women's and men's voices is, like speaking more in a monotone. Like guys will like hang out down here and just talk the whole time kind of in like this one pitch. Like you can hear that that's fairly normal and fairly typical of what you'd want to hear from a guy. It's like do, and hanging out there. Versus women's voices, they kind of bounce all over the place, and they're a little more sing-songy, quote unquote. That's how I've used it, or how I've heard it described before. Probably the best way to practice this is, if you're out to some friends, talk to them, hang out with them. Like my inflection kind of shifted naturally once I started spending time like with more women in like naturally women's spaces, and let myself like kind of be a little more bubbly and kind of be a little more like myself. Cause like before I was very put together. Like as a guy I was very like methodical and like kind of just very, straight shoe. Like everything was slow and took work, including like my voice. I spoke very slowly often. And so what I kind of allowed myself to do, post transitioning, and post being out kind of full time, was let myself be a little more bubbly, and like bounce a little bit when I talk and do these things, and like that like produces the desired like inflection effects of just like letting yourself be yourself, which is an interesting sentence, sorry. And like letting you have a little more fun in your sentences, and like kind of bouncing it all over the place, because you don't want to try to be more sing-songy, and you don't want to try and be like, oh look, I'm like bouncing all over the place, because then it starts becoming very manufactured, and you want it to be kind of natural and be true to who you are. And so like figuring out like your personality a little bit and getting those kind of steps in place. Other small things that I've kind of seen across the board, that I do like implement a little bit, but I don't like recommend, like vocal fry is a very good and useful tool to like simulating that like you're at the bottom of your register. And you can hear it there. Like if you make that sound in the back of your throat, that's called vocal fry. And so what that is that a lot of people will often vocal fry at the very bottom of their voice lines, and at the very end of their sentences, and at the very end of their vocal range. The problem is if you take that too far, like I'm currently doing right now and need to unlearn a little bit, it's very hard on your voice and makes it hard to stay in this register long term. And so you really want to like be comfortable, first and foremost, and then like let your voice do what it's going to do from there, with like a little bit of vocal fry if you want, but not a lot. Something else I've seen and something else like I tried and I got some success with is like, other channels say Adam's apple lifting. It does work. It's where you like, basically when you're trying to get your resonance really bright and forward, you're trying to get all your resonance above your Adam's apple or above your larynx. And that's kind of what like makes it sound more female versus male is below the larynx and female is above the larynx. The problem is like some people will suggest like if you like swallow and put your finger on your Adam's apple, you can like feel it pop up and down. And some people say that you should like try and keep it in that up position. This does work, but it's very hard on your voice and very stressful and very fatiguing on your voice. So in the long term, trying to get like the resonance to lock in versus trying to get the Adam's apple lifted and keeping it lifted, does work, but it's very hard and I can like feel the tension going. And so we want to like kind of keep it in a more natural place. Something else worth addressing, is Adam's apple, is falsetto. Kind of the voice register, nah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, ah. And while that's very like nice and very like, affirming to have that upper register to sing in, you don't really want your speaking voice to be in your falsetto. Because it starts coming across as very fake and it's very thin and there's no real resonance there, and people will probably clock you more for using your falsetto than for using just like upper resonance. And then probably one of the biggest things is sorry, I had to check my notes over here. Find a voice example to mimic. Like mine is, there's this YouTube channel called Murphy Napier. And she's a cis woman. She does like things on like fantasy and sci-fi. But like her voice is very much like goals for me. And so finding someone whose voice you can mimic and who you can listen to and start matching pitches and inflections of like how you want to sound like, that gives you a goal to work towards. And that helps a lot, to just kind of listen to it and work through that. And then probably the last thing, for me, is when you finally get things to lock in, have like a couple phrases, like key phrases, that help you get back into your right resonance that are also can just be fitted into most conversations. Like mine is all right, so. Like, all right, so. And then I'm back in my upper resonance, back in my mask, back in my like full on kind of stuff. And that gets me locked back into where I want to be. And so I can be like, all right, so how was the weather today? And like no one will think about it, but that gives me a tool to like check up on myself and that resonance and how I want it to be. And So I think that's a lot to think about. I'll stop there. Thank you all so much for commenting and subscribing. At the time making this video, we're almost at like 200 subscribers, which is awesome. Like, the channel's only been up for like a week and a half. I hope this helps you. If you have any questions on the clarification, I will happily pop in the comments and like respond to as many things as I can. This will not be the last voice video. I'll go in more depth about like each one of these things. But this was kind of an introduction. So I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all have a great day, and stay lovely and stay safe. Bye, y'all.